You are now listening to the 100th episode of Mark's Unexplained World by Mark the Medium, available on YouTube, Spotify, Amazon Prime, Podbean, and most other podcast platforms. This episode is about Pete the Poltergeist. So it's over to you now, Mark.
During the 1980s, in the city of Cardiff in Wales, United Kingdom, a humble lawnmower repair shop experienced excessive and consistent paranormal activity. This strange phenomena tormented the owners of the shop, John and Fred Matthews, for almost 15 years. The activity that the staff witnessed involved things like stones being thrown, wrenches and other various tools spinning on their own, and objects, including money, appearing from out of nowhere. Also, amongst the sometimes chaotic paranormal activity, the poltergeist would somehow manage to change the temperature in the shop from it being a normal room temperature to it suddenly, without any warning, being icy cold. As time went by, the poltergeist activity became increasingly regular and mischievous, so much so that the shop owners decided to give him the nickname of Pete. Greetings, Unexplainers. Thank you for tuning in once again and listening to this lawnmower throwing episode of Mark's Unexplained World. My name is Mark Hughes. I'm a psychic medium, a ufologist, a true crime buff, a podcaster, and a lover of leek soup. And just to give you a better idea of who I am and what I do, every Monday night I do a podcast on various subjects under the Unexplained banner. These include ufology, hauntings, disasters, and all sorts of paranormal phenomena, including true crime, unsolved crime, and missing people. So, if you are listening to this show on YouTube, please give us a review and a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. And if you are listening on any other podcast platforms, again, give us a like and a follow. In this episode, I'm going to tell you about the mischievous story surrounding Pete the Poltergeist. And this week's necessary disclaimer: well, this tale is more of a ghost story than anything else, so it is pretty much PG rated. However, as usual, you do listen at your own discretion. Also, all opinions and comments are strictly my own, but the facts of the case still remain. I also apologise if I pronounce anything incorrectly. My English, although it is my first and only language, in this episode I'm bound to screw up some of the Welsh-sounding names. But anyway, enough of this tomfoolery. Let us get back to the story. Cardiff, or according to Wikipedia, Cardiff is the capital and largest city of Wales, United Kingdom, with a population of 362,400 in the 2021 census, and forms a principal area officially known as the City and County of Cardiff. It is located in the southeast of Wales and in the Cardiff capital region, belonging to the Eurocities network of the largest European cities, with it having the honour of being the 11th largest city in the United Kingdom. Cardiff was ranked as a city back in 1905, and it was proclaimed as the capital of Wales in 1955, with it being the main commercial centre of Wales, as well as the base of the Senedd, otherwise known as the Welsh Parliament. It is also the most popular destination in Wales, with 21.3 million visitors in 2017. Cardiff is also the major centre for television and film productions, such as the 2005 revival of Doctor Who, Torchwood and Sherlock. and is the Welsh base for the main national broadcasters. People from all over the world believe in ghosts, spirits and other forms of paranormal conscious beings, with a 2005 Gallup poll finding that 37% of Americans believe in haunted houses. A poltergeist is perhaps the best known and in some cases the most feared type of paranormal entity. It is a type of spirit that is said to torment its victims with disturbing events, such as loud noises, foul smells, moving furniture, pushing things off shelves or out of cupboards, and by throwing objects at its unsuspecting victims. In the book Ghosts, Appearance of the Dead and Cultural Transformation by historian R.C. Finucane, he notes that the word poltergeist, and I quote, takes from the two German words meaning to create a disturbance, or more specifically to rumble, roll or bluster, and spirit. Though examples can be found in earlier centuries, this form of spiritual harassment only becomes commonplace in the post-Reformation era around 1600s. And from what I have read, the actual interpretation of these sometimes violent phenomena has actually been caused by a ghost or spirit is a fairly recent discovery. I mean, let's face it, once upon a time such events like these were thought to have been appertaining to witchcraft or even Satan himself. With horror films about ghosts and sometimes evil spirits like the Amityville Horror, The Exorcist and Poltergeist, to name but a few, having a major influence on how people today see or think of violent paranormal activity. Pete the Poltergeist, or otherwise sometimes known as the Cardiff Poltergeist, all happened during the 80s and early 90s around a lawnmower repair shop aptly named Mower Services, located in the Cardiff area of Cardiff in South Wales, UK. Mower Services was originally part of a row of terraced houses that were built in 1882, with husband and wife team John and Pat Matthews taking over the shop in 1979. It all started one quiet Saturday afternoon when one of the owners of the workshop, John Matthews, and one of his co-workers, who is also his wife's brother called Fred Cook, were watching a rugby game on a television set in a shed in the workshop yard. Now, I'm not going to lie to you here, people, as there are some reports that claim that the two workers were fixing an engine of some sort in the yard, but I'll let you decide, as it is probably not that relevant to the story anyway. Anyway, both men were busily getting engrossed in the game, or engine, when suddenly a strange noise caught their attention. Both men suddenly heard a loud bang, which they claimed sounded like a large rock hitting the shed's metal roof. They both stopped what they were doing, looked at each other, and just as they were about to shrug off the moment, it happened again. Another bang, and then another one. The noise itself sounded like something or someone was throwing stones at the roof of the workshop, so John Matthews, feeling brave and assuming at this stage it was probably just kids mucking about, went outside to investigate. However, when John Matthews went outside, he found to his amazement that there was no one there. This was just the beginning of the strange paranormal activity at the lawnmower workshop, as stones, amongst other things, were then being thrown both inside and outside of the building. After this first short break, in part 2, we will look at the further adventures of Pete the Poltergeist and the lawnmower repair shop.
This show is brought to you courtesy of Neil Packer and the Haunted Antiques Paranormal Research Centre. Find them online at www.hauntedresearchcentre.com or at 9 to 11 Regent Street, Hinckley, LE10 1AW. Open on Saturdays from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. for guided tours of the haunted rooms at just £3 per person. Booking is essential at all times, and over 16s only, please, unless accompanied by an adult. The haunted rooms are extremely haunted, and paranormal activity could and has taken place at any time. Some areas and particular objects or items can be quite scary and unnerving. Membership is available for £25 to qualify for selective offers. And why not download the app, available on both iOS and Android, for only $3.99, to keep up to date with what is coming up at the centre.
Thanks for listening to Mark's Unexplained World. If you are interested in parapsychology, quantum sciences, and true encounters with the other side, you may wish to visit The Weird Walk Home. That's my show on YouTube. Also, stay tuned, because After Dark with Tilly and Mark is creeping your way in June. Additionally, if you are interested in weird sciences, you may like to purchase my brand new book on Amazon. That would be Weird Time by Tim R. Swartz. It features lots of strange explanations and encounters with time from myself and other notable names like Lon Strickler and more. Thanks for listening.
Stones were being thrown about on both the inside and outside of the old lawnmower repair shop. And after a time, the moving objects and the stone throwing became so commonplace that the staff started to get used to it, so much so that they decided to nickname the mischievous spirit Pete the Poltergeist. John Matthews said to the local press, and I quote, "Oh, it all started with the poltergeist throwing things about. He was just throwing everything around in the shop. We looked at each other and could not believe it. It was the most fascinating couple of hours I'd ever spent. He's thrown things while people have been in the shop and while reps have been there." At one time during the working day, an engineer called Ian was busy fixing a lawnmower when all of a sudden he noticed some spanners or wrenches that were each fixed to a nail on the wall starting to swing. Ian looked at this swinging wrench for a moment and then glanced around the room trying to make sense of this strange phenomena. Ian was completely alone in the workshop. No one else had come by and there was no breeze. Ian then reached over to the swinging wrench and stopped it. However, when he walked away from it, the wrench began swinging again, only this time with much more intensity. And not only that, but this time multiple wrenches were all swinging together. And then, just a few seconds later, one of the wrenches flew off the wall of its own accord, and as he turned to watch, the wrench catapulted itself across the room. Ian was then hit in the chest by a small stone. So then, feeling a little anxious and freaked out, he bent over, grabbed the stone and chucked it into the corner of the repair shop, to which the stone replied by being thrown back towards him, seemingly from out of nowhere. And each time Ian threw the stone into the workshop corner, each time the stone returned. It was at this point Ian realised something incredibly strange was happening. Really? The swinging spanners did not trigger any alarm bells at all? Okay. Of course, like any mischievous poltergeist, Pete did not just stop at playing with the wrenches. Oh no, sometimes small carburettor floats would often move around on their own. And before I go any further, let us have an interesting side note. A carburettor float is a buoyant device that controls the fuel level within the carburettor of an engine. It is moved by a float needle that regulates the fuel flow, maintaining a consistent mixture for efficient combustion and smooth engine operation. The float is usually made of a hollow plastic, metal or fuel-resistant foam. A faulty float carburettor can cause engine problems such as rough idling, poor acceleration or even stalling. One evening, as he was leaving the shop, John Matthews, one of the workshop owners, decided he wanted to evaluate this Pete the Poltergeist phenomena. In order to do this, John Matthews placed a small carburettor float on a flat surface and challenged Pete to move it. As John Matthews was locking up the lawnmower workshop, he suddenly felt a prick in the palm of his hand. And when he opened his hand, he found, to his amazement, that the sharp end of the same small carburettor float had materialised itself in his palm. And when he went back into his workshop, he found that the small carburettor float he had placed in there as a trigger object had indeed disappeared. Some of the other poltergeist phenomena that happened at Mower Street services included radical changes in temperature, with it being a normal temperature at one moment and bone-chilling cold the next. There was also reports of a strange smell or an overpowering stench that would hang thick in the air and then slowly filter away. Other poltergeist activity included things like tools, screws, bolts and various other small engine parts being thrown around or finding their way to the workshop floor. Dishes that were once smashed to pieces were magically put back together again. A lawnmower started up on its own accord. Dust was dropped down the backs of workers' shirts and text was typed on a computer in the office above the shop. And as if this were not enough, on one occasion, blue flames emerged from a brass World War II shell case, that was on display as a souvenir in the workshop. After working at the lawnmower repair shop for 7 years, the building was given a complete renovation, which, of course, made the activity a lot worse, because there is nothing worse than a poltergeist that does not like change. Mind you, it wasn't all bad, as one of the most common reoccurring phenomena that Pete liked to conjure up was the spontaneous appearance of money. Ah yes, many times the family would jokingly ask for Pete the Poltergeist to throw some money their way, when, and to their surprise, 3 old pennies of unknown origin dating back to 1912 and some crumpled up £5 notes were found in the Mower Services retail shop the next day. Well, I suppose it is pretty obvious, really. I mean, after Pete had already been making objects like pens, keys and bolts appear from thin air, it is only natural that money would be next. I suppose they would just call it, what, progression? I know. Let's see if I can make this work. Pete, I want some money. No, nothing. I'll try again later on. The police had never been called out to the lawnmower workshop. The only time they were was when they had to investigate a break-in through the window at an engineering firm on the same road where apparently Pete the Poltergeist had first started haunting back in 1988. It had been reported then that even at this engineering firm, Pete used to throw stones and pin carburettor floats to the workplace ceiling. He is a little scamp, isn't he? And according to Fred Cook, who, if you remember, was John Matthews' brother-in-law, who also worked at the workshop, he said of Pete the Poltergeist, and I quote, "He pelted the police with stones, but they had heard of him, and knew what to expect. The men who came to replace the broken window were not happy about it, though. He pelted them too, so they rushed the job and left in a hurry." After this second short break, in part 3, we will look at more disturbances by Pete the Poltergeist and some of the attempts John Matthews tried in communication with the mischievous spirit.
Fright Nights was established in 1999 as the first company in the world to offer overnight ghost hunt experiences to the general public, pioneering paranormal events since the last century. Fright Nights operate at hundreds of the UK's most haunted and exclusive venues. All events have their own team of experienced paranormal investigators, mediums and psychics. They have a VIP members club for regular returning guests, offering loyalty discounts and exclusive invitation-only events. They can also host private events for your family and friends. You can contact them on 07852 998 628 or email them at office@frightnights.co.uk or take a look at their website at www.frightnights.co.uk, where you can see the many locations they investigate and learn about them and the opportunities they have available. Hundreds of ghost hunters join Fright Nights every month for the most thrilling ghost hunting experiences they'll never forget. If you haven't been on a ghost hunt before, then why not join them to see what it's all about? Why not visit their social media sites for up-to-date information on all the places they visit and to see what's coming up in the future? They look forward to seeing you all soon. Fright Nights Ghost Hunting Events. Remember, only the original will do.
As the days and weeks went by, the poltergeist activity started to become increasingly pronounced, so much so that it appeared to the lawnmower shop employees anyway that Pete the Poltergeist was taking some sort of morbid pleasure in the chaos that he was causing. Due to all this strange activity and the fact that it all seemed to start at the same time, John Matthews did wonder if it could be one of the other staff members trying to pull a few pranks on him. So, one evening after hours, John Matthews, with the other staff members all being very brave mode, decided to conduct a test and hold a séance. First, the staff went round the work and retail shop to ensure all the doors and windows were all locked up. Then they all placed their hands on the counter so that they knew that everyone was accounted for. However, even with everyone accounted for, the occasional sound of the odd stone could still be heard moving around the workshop. Once things had settled down, paranormally, around the works, they asked Pete if he could make his presence known to all in attendance. And according to all those present at the séance, Pete the Poltergeist broke the silence of the room by dropping a heavy rock on the counter. Then someone suggested asking Pete the Poltergeist various questions and then writing down his answers, to which Pete responded by throwing a pen across the room onto the counter. Whilst this poltergeist experience was an amazing phenomenon to witness, the staff at Mowers Services decided not to make it public. After all, they did not want to frighten any of the customers away and damage the business. So John Matthews and all the staff at the lawnmower workshop decided to keep this on a need-to-know basis, although they did, however, decide to tell some of their friends, which then meant, of course, that their friends wanted to come and check out the strange phenomena for themselves. So, over time, all their chums came round to see Pete the Poltergeist in action, throwing small stones into the corner of the workshop to see if anything will come back, and staring at the wrenches on the wall to see if they would start swinging. I think it was safe to say that their friend's visit to Mowers Services was definitely worth checking out. For not only did their friends see small stones and objects like the pin carburettor floats being thrown back at them in abundance, but some of their friends also witnessed the wrenches, amongst other things, swinging on the wall. And to top that, when a bunch of car keys went missing, and after a full search of both the work and retail shop of the premises, they miraculously reappeared when they slid across the floor towards their owner. In 1989, John Matthews contacted the Society of Psychical Research based in London. On an interesting side note here, the Society of Psychical Research, or the SPR for short, is a non-profit organisation in the United Kingdom. Its stated purpose is to understand events and abilities commonly described as psychic or paranormal. It describes itself as the, and I quote,
"the first society to conduct organised scholarly research into human experiences that challenge contemporary scientific models."
It does not, however, since its inception in 1882, hold any corporate opinions. SPR members assert a variety of beliefs with regard to the nature of the phenomena studied. The SPR sent one of their investigators, a man who went by the name of David Fontana, who was a British parapsychologist, author and professor of psychology at Cardiff University. David Fontana ended up spending over 2 years investigating the Pete the Poltergeist case from June 1989 until sometime in 1992. And after experiencing much of the paranormal activity himself, David Fontana concluded that the shop was indeed home to an unusually intelligent poltergeist. However, what he did not expect was there to be so much out-of-control psychic energy. And although David Fontana was able to replicate the strange phenomena of the stones returning when thrown into a specific corner of the workshop, he also thought this demonstrated the poltergeist had intent and the rudimentary intelligence necessary to accomplish this intent, i.e. throwing the stones back towards its victim. One evening, while John Matthews and his brother-in-law Fred Cook were working in the shop, Fred Cook suddenly had this intense feeling that he was being watched. So, lifting his head up to confirm his feelings, he saw in front of him, perched on a shelf, the image of a young boy, and when it suddenly dawned on him who he was looking at, Fred's blood ran cold. Fred then, very tactfully and without moving any part of his body, whispered to John Matthews and told him to turn around very slowly so as not to frighten the ghostly child of who he believed to be Pete. Unfortunately, John was a little too slow to turn around, because as he lifted up his head to see what Fred was looking at, the small apparition disappeared. But instead of just disappearing quietly, Pete the Poltergeist decided to leave a lasting impression on John Matthews in another way, by throwing a brick at his head. So, it was after this that the two workmen decided it was time to finish up for the day, lock up and go home. Fred Cook described the apparition as a small boy with a pale complexion and wearing tattered clothing of a bygone era. He also said, and I quote, "I had never been frightened until then, but I looked up and there he was sitting on a shelf." It somehow appeared that Fred Cook seeing Pete the Poltergeist changed the dynamic of everything. Fred claimed that after his experience, Pete became a bit obsessive with him and followed Fred Cook around everywhere. And it was also noticed that most of Pete the Poltergeist's activities at this point seemed to mainly focus on Fred as well, with the activity eventually overwhelming him, so much so that eventually Fred Cook ended up moving away and took some time off. Despite the staff trying to keep tight-lipped about these strange phenomena, the news of Pete the Poltergeist travelled fast. Two priests from a nearby church heard about this Pete business and decided to check it out for themselves. One of the priests said, and I quote, "When I was there, I heard the stones or noises coming from the back of the shop. When I asked them what it was all about, I was told, 'Oh, that's Pete the Poltergeist.' I did not really believe him. So I opened the door and looked through, and I could see a stone whizzing around on the floor. There was nobody else out there." After enduring months of Pete the Poltergeist's general mischief, John Matthews concluded that if perhaps they moved their shop, the entity itself would finally leave them alone. However, Pete, being the out-of-box thinker that he was, decided that if he could not move shops with Fred Cook, then the pesky poltergeist would follow Fred to his home and continue his mischievous pranks there instead. This, of course, quite naturally caused Fred Cook and his wife a whole new chapter in how to get stressed. Eventually, Fred Cook consulted with a medium, and slowly over time, Pete the Poltergeist finally gave up and went away. So John Matthews, Fred Cook, and all the staff at the mower services, the company, were at last free of the spirit that not only threatened their business, but also their sanity. Thus ended the 14-year chapter of paranormal experiences, with no more reported occurrences in the area since. I also think it's worth pointing out here that both Fred Cook and John Matthews, apart from the one time when Fred actually saw Pete, insist that at no time were they ever afraid of the strange activity in the shop. One final note for you before I end this podcast. I cannot seem to find a lot of details regarding this report, so it may be just an urban legend, and you know how quickly those spread. But I will let you decide. There was some research done on the spirit of Pete that revealed that there were rumours of a young boy who was killed on the road close to the mower services location, and that it could have been his spirit that was haunting the lawnmower repair shop. These rumours were later confirmed when the boy's older sister came forward after reading about the case of Pete the Poltergeist in the local paper. Now, I'm not going to lie to you, unexplainers. There is an awful lot of conflicting reports on this case, both online and in books. So I've tried to be as accurate as I can with the information I've managed to get hold of. It is mainly the names and relationships with the staff that were a little off kilter, but to be fair, none of that really altered the main story at all. Okay, let's give this another try and see if I can make this work this time. Pete, I want some money. No, still nothing. You would think for my 100th show I would get something, right? Wouldn't you? Oh well. If anything does turn up, I'll let you know.
Thank you all for taking the time out to listen to this episode of Mark's Unexplained World. In our next episode, show number 101, we are going to be looking at the Lonely Hearts Killers. Raymond Fernandez and Martha Beck were an American serial killer couple. They were convicted of just one murder, but they are known to have committed at least 2 more, and were suspected of having killed up to 20 victims in total during a killing spree between 1947 and 1949. After their arrest, the trial for serial murder in 1949, Fernandez and Beck became known as the Lonely Hearts Killers for meeting their unsuspecting victims through personal ads posted in newspaper Lonely Hearts columns.
This show was written and researched by myself, Mark Hughes, and proofread and edited by Linda Hughes. The pronunciations of all the names of places, though, was all mine. And if you did hear the dog barking in the background, that was Oreo. I don't know if you picked it up or not. Anyway, with special thanks to Neil Packer and the staff at the Haunted Antiques Paranormal Research Centre in Hinckley. And a big thank you to everyone else out there for listening. If you know of any other intriguing stories under the Unexplained banner, including ufology, hauntings, disasters, and any other sort of paranormal phenomena, including true crime, unsolved crime, and missing people, just drop me a direct message and I will see what I can do. And lastly, again, just to add, if you are listening to this show on YouTube, please give us a review and a thumbs up, and subscribe to my channel. And if you are listening on any other podcast platforms, again, give us a like and a follow. And thank you all in advance. Mark's Unexplained World, because there's more to the paranormal than meets the third eye. And remember, guys, keep it real, because being real is better than being perfect. This show and all its contents are covered by basic copyright of Mark the Medium.